I don't know if it's always going to be this way, but housing is the number one barrier that I see for veterans that are trying to get employment. Housing and also a pretty good percentage of veterans that come in the door, and like I have a veteran that took care of his father, who was an Army veteran, and he took care of his father for 8 years. His father dies, and so when he shows up to WorkSource, he's got an 8-year gap in employment, which we're trying to work on. But gaps in employment, sometimes computer literacy, or maybe not so much computer literacy. It might be just they don't have Wi-Fi at home or resources, but we have a resource room with like 10 computers, and literally citizens of Whatcom County or welcome, anybody can come in actually and use our computers. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. If anyone else has questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll ask, or just go ahead and unmute and ask yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, hi, can you hear me okay?
I hear
Absolutely.
you, Rebecca.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for allowing me to join this meeting. I've been speaking with a number of retired veterans who are experiencing discrimination and issues with housing that isn't up to code, and have been really frustrated with the resources that they are aware of, and was hoping to just get a little bit of insight as far as a good avenue to guide them to that that can help them get immediate relief with these issues with housing not being up to code.
I think the housing up to code question might be a good question for potentially the city staff. I'm looking at Katie Sullivan right now about her. I'm just thinking about the landlord inspection. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah, and they haven't had any success there, and like as far as ensuring that they have handicap parking for that need, it seems like a round robin, and I'm just not familiar enough with the process, or like what resources are available specifically to veterans so that they don't get caught in the process, hopefully.
Yeah, Liz, but just put a link in the chat here.
So NVLSP is a National Veteran Lawyer Project. It's where I refer my clients that are having landlord tenant issues. Again, if it's any civil non-criminal issue, I refer them to NVLSP. There is a chapter in King County that does help folks here in Bellingham. But if you're looking for something veteran specific, I would go there. And again, obviously, through the Opportunity Council, there's a whole host of landlord, tenant things. But again, for veteran specific, NVLSP has been fantastic. And it never costs the veteran anything. It's all pro bono, and they are actual lawyers.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
One more question I see in the chat here from Marisa. Paul, does discharge status matter when accessing your services?
I'm trying to find the mute button. I can work with any discharge, excluding dishonorable, because if they got out under an dishonorable discharge, then they went through the whole court martial and went to prison and the whole 9 yards. So they don't normally receive veterans for services, but honorable, general under honorable, other than honorable, bad conduct, discharge, I can work with all of them, because that's sometimes the discharge status is a barrier to employment in itself. So we work with veterans that have barriers to employment. So good to go.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions for Paul while he's with us?
Paul, could you put your phone number in the chat?
Roger that.
Thank you.
And for the record, 360-543-3445.
Thank you.
Heidi has a question, which is, What does less than honorable mean? Not dishonorable.
So a veteran can be discharged from the military with there are 5 different character discharges. Honorable is the one that you think of, that you completed your terms of service. You're going to go use the VA home loan, the GI Bill, and live life. A general under honorable conditions means that you had some minor disciplinary infractions that were handled at the local level. It could be things like you were late to formation, you had a weight problem. So again, these are kind of like, consider the misdemeanors, if you will, of the military world, gets you an under honorable or a general discharge. The next discharge down that does start precluding veterans from services is something called an other than honorable discharge. This basically would equate to a felony in the civilian world. These folks actually are adjudicated through the Uniform Code of Military Justice and are found guilty of essentially a felony. These would be things like DUI, sexual assaults, larceny. So again, that's the 3rd level down. Then there is, let me keep going. There's one more before bad conduct discharge. And I am drawing a blank. I apologize. I didn't think I'd be giving this brief today. So there's one more bad one under OTH that you don't qualify for benefits for. And then the worst one is what's called a bad conduct discharge. On active duty, we called it the big chicken dinner. This means you do not qualify for any veteran services. Generally, you are incarcerated if you are in receipt of a bad conduct discharge. This again would be capital crimes, pretty heavy stuff. So if someone has a BCD, they usually are not eligible to upgrade that BCD, where everyone else, if you have a general, an other honorable, or an OTH, you can always file for upgrade if you have mitigating circumstances, or if your character has improved since discharge, you can file for that upgrade. Again, NVLSP, that law firm that I linked to before in the chat, helps with discharge upgrades. Traditionally, we did see under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, LGBTQ plus folks were discharged under general discharges. Now they, again, working with NVLSP, the law firm, will get that discharge upgraded to honorable, and that does go pretty quickly. So again, full benefits from the VA, honorable discharge. Some benefits from the VA are a general under honorable and an under honorable. And other than honorable precludes you from most benefits. I know there's some housing programs that can qualify under other than honorable, but you lose healthcare, the GI Bill, things like that. And then there's a bad conduct discharge. With this, you are not eligible for any veteran benefits whatsoever. Any questions, or you need me to elaborate or go through that one more time?
I see Marcus D has a question.
Yeah, I'm pardon me. I'm actually isolating with COVID these days, so I'm just sparing you my video. Hey, I want to, and thank you for your time. I want to take advantage of this opportunity to note that we have several veterans who are not getting services in our streets right now, and it is about emergency sheltering that I'm most concerned right now, and I am disappointed we don't have that as an agenda item, and I'm hoping we can have some robust discussion about that today.
Do you have a question for the panelist, Marcus?
Yeah, I'm trying to talk to you about, I'm trying to talk to all of us, including the panelists, to specifically ask us all to step outside of our normal roles and try to find a way to influence emergency sheltering for those that we cannot serve. This is rather a needs assessment for your in your realm, and I'm asking you to stretch a little bit with us to help advocate for emergency services that do not exist right now, emergency sheltering. So thank you for your time, Terry.
You bet, Marcus. And there's going to be time at the end for things that are not on the agenda, so you're welcome to speak more at that time.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can introduce that as more of an emergency agenda item. Thanks.
Any other questions for Paul before we move? I mean, I think it's a good segue to move towards Liz, but I don't want, if anyone has questions for Paul, to get missed. So wait a second here.
And I'll just say, I mean, you can email me, call me, whatever you want. I mean, in my heart and soul, I'm here to help veterans in any way I can. And so call me and I'll reach out to them and try to point them in the right direction. So, and I can help them find a DVOP in any state in the nation.
Thanks so much for your time, Paul. I just really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you.
You as well. Okay, Liz, is it okay if I call on you next to speak? I feel like you have a superpower here that you kind of alluded to a little bit when you're talking about those discharge levels, because you're a veteran services officer for entire community. And so is upgrading a discharge something that's within your wheelhouse?
So it sort of is. So again, my name's Liz. I run the Whatcom County Veterans Program. I have several different hats with that program, but I was invited today to specifically speak about what I do as a veteran service officer. So what a veteran service officer is someone who works with the veteran to help them obtain their benefits from the VA. So part of that is discharge upgrades. If it's fairly straightforward, I can walk, again, LGBTQ folks are a great example of walking them through a discharge upgrade. If your discharge was due to a criminal offense, usually that's more than I can handle here at the county level. So I do refer to those lawyers at NVLSP, and they're fantastic. I am on a first name basis with several of them there. They're mostly veterans themselves doing pro bono work and are great for those discharge upgrades. But what I wanted, hopefully is useful for the group today, is I wanted to break down, so the VA is divided into two separate houses. One is the Veterans Health Administration. So those are the folks, again, if you want to enroll your veteran in healthcare, so they can go to the Mount Vernon CBOC or get community care, that's Veterans Healthcare. The other half of the house that I spend probably 80% of my work on is what's called the Veterans Benefits Administration. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about that right now. To start on both hands, if you want to help a veteran access their veteran benefits, the very first thing they need is something called a DD-214. That basically is their report card from active duty. That's where, again, it will show their character of discharge, that honorable, that general, that bad conduct discharge. It also will list where they serve. So say they served in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Vietnam, and that can become important when filing for benefits. It also has their character of service, if they have any awards or medals or anything like that. If you come in contact with a veteran that does not have their DD-214, the very best thing you can do is help them apply for that DD-214. I know that the Opportunity Council does that, Paul does that, the Vet Center does that. I here at the county also do that. I would say, for sake of simplicity, you can always reach out to me at the county and I'll get you that form for that veteran. So again, for any veteran to access any benefits through the VA, they do need their DD-214. That's step one. That's their report card from the military. There are a whole host of benefits from the VA that a veteran can qualify for. One that I want to mention specifically, because I assume often when working with homeless folks, income can be a factor. The VA does have a program called Poverty Pension. And if you are a combat era veteran and make less than $1,220 a month, you can qualify for this benefit. So combat era, we always think of the Vietnam or Korea, but more importantly today, anyone who served post 1991, Congress has said this is a combat era. So if you have some younger folks that maybe are on Social Security disability and have no other income, again, say they're on the 798 basic Social Security, they could qualify again for this poverty pension that does increase their income up to $1,220 a month, and that's non-taxable. So that can be a boon to some of our folks in the community. In addition to the poverty pension, I also help folks file something called VA compensation. So what this is any injury that was caused or exacerbated by active duty that bothers you today. If that's the case, you're entitled to compensation for that injury. So a lot of folks we have, and I'm a veteran myself, we have something called tinnitus. It's a ringing in our ears that we develop from being around rifle fire, loud engines, things like that. What I would say is any veteran that you come across that you're working with, it's worth scheduling them with a veteran service officer, again, to see if they have any of these disabilities. At the county right now, I'm a federally accredited service officer. There's a fellow named Andy Part-Time who's a federally accredited service officer, and we will definitely walk your veteran through that process. And I'm trying not to overwhelm you with too much, but long story short, if you had a homeless veteran, say someone came to you, had their DD-214 and said, I want to file for benefits, great, call my office. We're going to do something called intent to file. VA that says, hey, VA, I'm a veteran and I want to file a claim in the next year. This gives us 1 year to get their documentation together. So even if your veteran does not have the DD-214, as long as he or she know their branch of service, we can file the intent to file. That gives us 1 year to get their paperwork together to file the claim. And that's important because the VA backdates all claims. So let's say someone came in today, August 4th, and said, hey, I'm a veteran, I want to file for benefits, I don't have my DD-214. We should do that one-page intent to file, submit it to the VA so it's on record. We would then do what's called an SF-180 form to get their DD-214 from the Department of Defense. That can take up to 6 months. Once we had that DD-214, that's going to take about 6 months to get, we then could file the claim for the veteran. But again, that veteran won't have lost out on those 6 months of benefits because we would have filed the intent to file. Does anyone have questions on that right now? Because I want to make that really clear. Anybody? Okay. So again, and then so what disability is, again, is anything caused or exacerbated by service. So often, to be frank, folks on the streets can have mental health challenges like PTSD. And again, that's something we want to explore, because even if they had, ACEs and trauma during childhood, if their time in basic training exacerbated that, if we can show that they had mental health challenges on active duty and have mental health challenges today, we can file a claim for that. And the dollar amounts go in increments from 0 to 100. 0 is you're service connected, but you're not paid anything because you have this disability, but it's kind of taken care of. This might be like, hey, you broke your arm, but the surgeons took care of you and you're okay. Versus 100% service connection is $3,500 a month tax-free, and that's for total disability. Often, many of my formerly homeless clients, again, have been struggling with their post-traumatic stress disorder for 20 or 30 years. Again, they're unable to work because of the post-traumatic stress disorder. So again, if we are able to get them that compensation at $3,500 a month, that is tax-free, that can help them. And again, it goes in increments from $0 to $3,500. If you really want to break it down, it goes 190 to 60, 400. It jumps up about $200 in increments of percentages at 10% up to that 3,500. Increased VA disability increases your chance and acceptance of the VA programs. If you have increased VA disability, it moves up your priority code in the VA healthcare system. It qualifies you for further educational benefits. It can qualify you for points if you're applying for federal jobs. There can be discount ferry passes, discount state park passes. And I know, again, when we're working with someone homeless, our goal is stability. So the very first thing is, again, get that intent to file so we can get that claim in for them to get them some additional income in their home. And then once they're stable, then they can take advantage of some of the things that this disability offers. Again, those state park passes, education. If you're in receipt of a VA disability, you qualify for something called Voc Rehab that can help pay for college. And that's beyond the GI Bill that they might already qualify for. Any questions so far?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Terry.
Oh, wait a minute. Marisa just put one in the chat. Do people have the chance to appeal a decision?
Yes. So there are 2 different ways to appeal a decision. And the VA overhauled all this in 2018, and they did a great job with it. So there's something called a higher level review, which says, hey, VA, you have all the right documents, but I think you made a mistake. Because again, the folks at the VA who adjudicate claims are human beings. They can miss paperwork, make errors. So there's a higher level review. The other thing is something called a supplemental review. And that is, say the VA denied the veteran in 2020, but then they ended up getting further medical diagnosis or a second medical opinion, in 2021. We would submit that 2021 medical opinion along with the supplemental claim. And then the VA would re-adjudicate that claim and make a new choice. And I can spend a lot of time getting into appeals, which again, it's literally week-long classes that I go to. But long story short, yes, someone can appeal. The higher level review is simply the VA made a mistake. We want them to relook at the paperwork. The supplemental claim is, hey, I've got new information that wasn't available to you at the time. If both of those fail, then you go on to what is the traditional reviews panel. And you may have heard about that. The Board of Veteran Review is in Washington, D.C. It has about a 2-year backlog. So again, I try really hard never to have any of my clients, again, go to the Board of Veteran Reviews because it takes so long. So it does go before a federal judge. There are unfortunately a ton of vacancies on that panel right now. Ideally, the VA has set it up with the higher level review and the supplemental review that you shouldn't have to go to BVA, that you're talking to the VA back and forth, because every time you're denied, the VA sends you a decision letter and tells you why you're denied. It's basically the cheat sheet of what you need to submit to the VA to have a successful claim. Did that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you. There's some more in the
Okay.
chat here that I'm going to read.
Okay.
One question is, what about those who have more than one DD-214?
Okay, sure. Lots of people have multiple DD-214s. You can have multiple DD-214s for many reasons. Some folks may have served in the Navy, got their DD-214 and then left and then re-enlisted in the Air Force or the Army. In that case, if we're submitting to a claim to the VA, we're going to submit all of those DD-214s because again, we want to make sure, again, I should preface, and I apologize because you guys don't do claims for a living. So when I file a claim to the VA for someone, I send in current diagnosis of their disability, which is a doctor's note, and their DD-214s. We do not submit their active duty records. The VA won't even accept them from us because for all the VA knows, we doctored them. So when we submit that DD-214 and the veteran signs off on the form that we use to file the claim, the VA pulls all the active duty medical records on behalf of that veteran. So again, if your veteran has multiple DD-214s, we would want to submit all of them to make sure that they didn't just pull the records from the Navy when the fella actually or lady actually had, records from the Army as well. In addition, some local enlisted folks will get a DD-214 for each term of enlistment. The Navy does it that way. So when I take my VSO hat off and I put on my hat here at the county where we do offer financial assistance, I'll often have a veteran who served their first tour or their first enlistment honorably, and then their second enlistment wasn't honorable. We at the county would just use that first DD-214 to qualify them. The VA does the same thing. If the veteran's looking for healthcare, the VA is only going to look at that DD-214 with that honorable discharge. We're just going to disregard that less than honorable service. Did that answer your question?
It did. So I want to clarify though, it doesn't matter in what order those DD-214s were issued. You're going to look at the highest character of service.
Correct. Yes. And to be
Great.
frank, the order of issue would be the honorable one first. The military is not in the game of re-enlisting folks with less than honorable discharges. I mean, for obvious reasons.
Right. Steve has a question in the chat here, and Steve's on our outreach team, so probably a question coming from experience. What about vets who are so damaged that they just won't engage, such as the unsheltered, living outside of base camp or outside of any other shelter?
That's a hard one, Steve. And what I'll say is the veteran has to be ready to file benefits. I can't do it for you. You can't do it for them. Unfortunately, that veteran has to be ready to file the claim. And the reason why is once you file a claim, the VA is going to book you for medical evaluations to determine that level of disability. So the veteran has to be willing to go to those medical appointments. And it's a hard thing because I can see folks who need benefits who again are missing out because they're unwilling to engage. And it's not just our unsheltered veterans. One of my biggest things, I run into folks in my personal life more is the veteran who is that Vietnam or Iraq vet who, to be frank, I know is entitled to benefits and deserves them, but won't file the claim because they want to save it for someone they think that is more needy. This is an ongoing conversation. And all I can say is for your folks, who are struggling is if you can be their advocate, that's huge. Again, if you are able to go with them to their VA appointments, if they're willing to fill out the form, I can do that for you. I can package something that's going to get approved, but I do need you to follow up and make the appointments. And again, the VA does permit, guests to come with someone to the VA appointment. Often for my married veterans, I encourage them to bring their spouse, to help them make that appointment. The county does have the veteran transportation program through the Opportunity Council. Again, it has a volunteer pick that veteran up where they're at and take them to their appointments. Part of the reason we created that program was, again, these veteran evaluation appointments can be all over. They're contracted exams. So again, we can get a volunteer to take someone to Seattle or take someone to Mount Vernon, wherever that contracted exam is. And sometimes for your vet, it's also just explaining and I know it sounds harsh, but I lay out the dollar amounts. Again, wouldn't your life be better if you were getting $600 a month tax-free? What would that look like to you?
Thanks, Liz. And I think we'll hear more from Hannah when it's her turn about what she can do to help support veterans when they're trying to connect with these medical appointments as well. And I realize now that I didn't really do a great job of kind of framing who I've invited. Paul represents mostly employment, works at WorkSource. That's where the computer lab is, where he can help veterans. Paul does not have to work with a homeless veteran, right? He can help any veteran connect with those resources. So my question for you, Liz, is do veterans need to be homeless when they seek services from you?
No, they do not. So veteran service officer services are free to anyone in Whatcom County. I also have a contract with San Juan County. You do not need to be homeless. In fact, if you're a veteran and you're a provider, I want you to call me so we can look and see what your VA benefits are. Again, the bulk of my clients right now are actually retirees of the Vietnam era. And a lot of these ladies and gentlemen are quite successful. But again, because Agent Orange poisoned them, they're entitled to benefits. So again, you absolutely do not need to be low income to access veteran service officer benefits, to access VA compensation claim benefits. Again, you could be a retired general or admiral and you are absolutely entitled to benefits. You could be a Fortune 500 businessman. You are absolutely entitled to compensation benefits through the VA. In fact, I often file hearing claims for my older veterans because now veterans healthcare, interestingly, is not for all veterans. I found this boggling as a veteran myself. The only folks who qualify for veterans healthcare are service-connected veterans or low-income veterans. So I have a lot of aging veterans who want VA hearing aids because they're really good and don't qualify because these gentlemen, for the most part, gentlemen in this case, may have been, say, engineers or, MBAs in their career. So their retirement puts them over income for VA healthcare. The cutoff for VA healthcare, you have to make less than $3,000 a month here in Whatcom County. So if you make over $3,000 a month, you have to be what's called service connected. So again, I mentioned tinnitus when I first came on this Zoom. Tinnitus is ringing in the ears. I don't know a veteran who doesn't have it. So I work with a lot of these gentlemen who are like, hey, I don't want this money. I just want the hearing aids. And I say, great, let's file a tinnitus claim and you can donate that money to a nonprofit of your choice, but let's get you your hearing aids. The only thing that the county does that is income-based is, again, I do administer the Veterans Advisory Board Fund that is based off of income eligibility. And my board and county council has set that at 60% of area median income. So if you are sending a veteran to me for temporary financial assistance, that does have an income requirement. But again, I think Terry invited me today to talk about the veterans benefits and not the fund as much.
I was going to ask you about that for my next question, but I'm talking too much. So I'm going to let other people ask questions.
I'd love to ask a question, please, Liz.
Go for it.
This is Rebecca speaking. So I was really shocked to hear the comment about veterans not wanting the support because they feel like other people deserve it more. And it seems so much more likely that people just don't have the ability to do something like that because their level of functionality is so damaged from their service, from trauma beyond service when they tried to re-enter, society. So I'm curious about what kind of resources are available for people who don't have the capacity, the ability, or are too traumatized to advocate for themselves and take that step. Who can assist them if they don't have the wherewithal to be able to advocate for themselves in that instance?
So I think that's a good question. It's kind of like the one that Steve asked. So again, what I would say is I don't think there's an official channel. The VA, unfortunately, doesn't assign you an advocate. And I know Gary Dolan with the VASH program is going to speak later. So I would say it does fall, to be frank, and I'm going to look at you guys in the community as housing case managers and housing advocates. There is no official channel, unfortunately, for a veteran who's struggling that you call the VA and they're going to assign someone to help you. That doesn't exist as far as I know. So again, it really does come down to volunteers, members of the community to help someone engage in services. I'm not sure if that's helping answer your question or not.
I'm just, that is helpful, but I'm curious because you said you can't fill the form out for them. Another person can't fill out the form for the additional benefits if they're still experiencing. Did I misunderstand?
No, not the form. So again, that's what I do for a living. I help people complete paperwork.
Yes.
But again, once I help someone complete the paperwork and package it to the VA and send it off, the VA is going to reach out to that person to schedule exams. That's what I can't help with. I can't drag you to answer your phone when the VA calls you.
That
and
makes sense.
and to be frank, that is a problem. And that's why, again, I spoke about the intent to file. When I get a call from a case manager or someone who's currently homeless who wants to file a claim, I file the intent to file and I tell the veteran, look, you have to be prepared to follow through on this process. That means you're going to need a phone number. You're going to need an address because there is no way around that. The VA is going to reach out to you via your mailing address and your phone number. And I understand both of those are barriers, which is why, again, we do the intent to file because that gives us hopefully a year to get that veteran somewhere stable enough that they have a mailing address and they have a phone number so the VA can reach out to schedule those compensation exams.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So there's just kind of a little bit of a missing link right now as far as like people who are houseless, kind of like trying to urge them to do more long-term planning when the short term is vital. But yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up in my head. Thanks, Liz.
Rebecca, I just would like to add really quickly that if there's veterans that are experiencing homelessness, our homeless outreach team can walk alongside them and help guide them into services, whether it's housing services, whether it's VSO services, or even employment with Paul's program. So they're always available. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me ask kindergarten questions in a college course.
Oh, not at all. There's no bad question. None. Are there any more for Liz before I ask her another? Okay, while you're all thinking, my question is, what kind of financial assistance can you offer veterans, and when is it appropriate to refer one to you for that assistance?
Okay. So the county also levies a small portion of property taxes through Washington State Code for low-income veterans. Now, in this case, there are some qualifications around that money. Obviously, the person must be a Whatcom County resident. So that means even if they're homeless, we do have to show some tie to the community. Often it's if someone moves here to get a job, we use that job or school as their tie to the community. If they have some sort of address with friends or family in the community. So again, we offer what's temporary financial assistance. That means less than 3 months of assistance. So that's someone, you do have to have an honorable discharge, and that is per Washington State Code, and you must be below 60% of area median income. I think where we do differ for some of the OC services, and the county actually does, we do have a contract with the OC for housing services, and they do great things for our homeless veterans. But when you would see it, send a veteran to the county maybe versus OC is if that veteran's currently housed and needs to get into a new place, you do not have to be homeless to qualify for VAF. In fact, I don't work with that many homeless people, I'll be honest. Most of my folks, again, are housed and something's gone wrong in their housing and they need to move, or they just want to move. Again, as long as they meet the 60% AMI and the honorable discharge, we will pay for that deposit and first month's rent. In addition, we can cover mortgages. I know a lot of other programs can't cover mortgages. So if we have a veteran that's been laid off or a lot with the Sumas flooding, we picked up some mortgages. We also can do limited home repair. So again, for your homeowner veteran who's maybe having some problems, we definitely help with that. And again, I apologize because I know this is about homelessness. So a lot of the VAF, we send money down to the Opportunity Council to help house homeless veterans, leaving my office more to do the temporary financial assistance for the folks who don't need case management. That's something I don't provide. When folks come see me, it's usually you just need a shot in the arm to move on. Because again, who's got $3,000 saved up to move apartments? I don't know. We serve a lot of folks. They graduate from BTC, Western, or Whatcom, and the GI Bill ends. But they might need help with their rents before, their job that Paul helps them find picks up. Again, it's temporary financial assistance. It is pretty fast and easy to access. Again, I'm not a case manager. It's pretty much show me your DD-214, your bank statement. I give you something called a landlord statement. You take it to your landlord. If it's the mortgage, you bring the mortgage statement due or the utilities that are due, and we pay that. Can I clarify more, Terry?
That was great. So it sounds like if someone really needs prevention services, which is prevention from becoming homelessness,
yes,
you're a good person to contact.
Correct.
If someone's working with a veteran that is experiencing current homelessness, OC is the proper referral.
Yes, that's the exact, thank you you said that beautifully and simply. Again, and literally when a homeless veteran calls me, like I kind of triage what's going on. And if there is a VA claim, we chat. But if it's housing, I refer them down to the OC. And you want to do that, Terry, and I'm sure you'll get into it, because when you refer that veteran to the Whatcom Homeless Service Center, they're getting screened in for all programs. So there's the VA subsidized housing program, there's SSVF, and again, the county sends those VAF dollars down there as well. So that gets that veteran tied into all of those programs. So again, you guys can do your magic and figure out where they fit best in those programs.
Thanks, Liz. That was great. Any other questions for Liz before we move on? Looking in the chat. No. Okay. Thanks so much, Liz. That was really, really helpful. Appreciate it. I think I'm going to switch gears and go to Gary Dolan here from HUD-VASH. Gary is a licensed clinical social worker supporting homeless veterans in permanent supportive housing. You're muted, my friend.
Sorry.
There we go.
Thank you. Do you have a particular place where you want me to begin with this, Terry?
Just an overview of HUD-VASH, how veterans connect to HUD-VASH, and your role in that program.
Okay, HUD-VASH is a program by which the Department of Veteran Affairs has worked with HUD to provide Section 8 housing vouchers to homeless veterans. Currently in Whatcom County, we have right about 56 or 57 vouchers, and I would say that 80 or 90% of those are filled. The problem that we're having right now is that it's impossible to find an apartment. And if we do find an apartment, all the prices of these apartments are higher than the payment standards set by the department, by the housing authority. So the other thing that we're running into is that we also only have one emergency shelter, basically base camp, and a lot of veterans don't like staying there. So what happens is if we have a homeless veteran in Whatcom County, and they can get referred to me and to Opportunity Council to get involved with the VASH program. I lost my place. Sorry. If we can get these people involved and get the process moving, then sometimes we can get the housing authority to move a little bit faster. But right now, I just want you all to know that when we refer somebody to the housing authority and they fill out an application, it can take upwards to 2 months or more sometimes to actually get them approved and to start looking for housing. And in the meantime, a lot of these people are not comfortable staying at the base camp. And so they're sleeping outside, or they're setting up tents on the street or whatever. The homeless situation, in my opinion, is still quite serious and seems to be growing day by day. And it's becoming more and more difficult to find appropriate housing for these individuals. The other thing that's going on that makes things a little bit more complicated is that we have a lot more, this is my opinion right now, a lot more street violence. And we have a lot more dissatisfaction in general with homelessness and how people are feeling about the fact that they are homeless. So what we try to do is the following. If a homeless veteran is interested in HUD-VASH housing, they can either call me or they can call the Opportunity Council directly. They will announce themselves as a homeless veteran, and then they will conduct an intake. Once that intake is conducted, then it's sent to coordinated entry. And then coordinated entry will determine this person's eligibility on a simple level. And then it's quite often referred to me or my partner, Josh. And then we will look into their eligibility and see if indeed they are really eligible. And sometimes if they're not, I can now request an extension to have their eligibility extended, let's put it that way. And I've been able to get permission to house a few extra veterans that normally would not have been eligible. The problem is we don't have housing, and the housing is so expensive that it's difficult to find a place for these people to live. Let me throw it open for questions because I'm not quite sure what it is that people want to know.
I'll say a thing and then I'll ask you a question.
Sure.
So HUD-VASH is a Section 8 voucher, so that's a permanent subsidy for as long as the veteran complies with the program, correct?
That is correct.
By and large, what's the eligibility criteria for VASH? I know that there's some outliers that you mentioned, but generally, what's the rule of thumb there?
Well, I wish I could tell you what the rule of thumb is. Usually what I do is when I get a referral on a veteran, the Opportunity Council goes through a program that they use to find out if the person is eligible. I have a more sophisticated way of doing that by going into the database. And the only thing I can tell you is that if the person is in the VA database, that usually means that they're eligible for housing. And it's hard for me to explain to you what the rules are because they don't seem to apply evenly all the time to everybody. So if a person is eligible for housing, then I will call that individual and or my partner will, and we'll try to do a screening. Once we do a screening, we bring the individual in and we begin the application process. It is important to note right now that it seems to be much more difficult to get veterans involved in HUD-VASH. We have reduced veterans' homelessness in Whatcom County supposedly by around 80 or 85%. So a lot of times the people that are left that we're trying to bring in for housing are the people who are much more chronically homeless, mentally ill, and or drug addicted. And so therefore working with these people is a long and often arduous, hopefully rewarding process, but difficult to say the least. I work with Terry and the coordinated entry people at Opportunity Council to try to get these people involved, and it's quite difficult. Many of them don't have telephones. Many of them don't have access to anything. And so it's difficult to find them. So therefore we use the HOT team to help track down some of these individuals and try to get them scheduled. It's a very, very, very difficult and often complicated process. I have spoken to the Housing Authority recently in terms of their administrators about seeing what they can do to make the process, the application process a little quicker. And I've been told that they're working on it and there should be some changes coming in this next coming year. Question.
Any more questions? I have more, so I will
Keep
wait.
going. I don't,
Okay. Would you say, Gary, that most of the veterans you serve have an honorable discharge?
No.
Okay.
Quite a few of them do. Quite a few of them have different mixed up discharges, and a lot of times I have to call my friend Liz to get an understanding of what some of those are, because it gets very complicated. But this last year, eligibility was extended. And so under certain circumstances, I can take a person who normally would not have been eligible, and I can get permission to go ahead and house them. My biggest problem, again, right now, is the fact that I can't always make contact with these individuals, and they don't have, the experience in their lives to keep an appointment, to schedule an appointment, to know when it is, and to follow through with it. So I've been using the HOT team more and more to contact these individuals. And sometimes it's just not very successful. But the housing is permanent, affordable housing. And we have different vouchers. We have vouchers for what we call tenant-based housing, which means that if a person gets a tenant-based voucher, with our help, he can go out into the community and try to find an apartment that falls within the purvey of the payment standard of the Housing Authority, and then we can move them in. I have a special arrangement with the Elks Club to provide those individuals, if they do move into an apartment, with a very nice $500 or $600 move-in package that includes a bed and all kinds of things that they would need to get started in their apartment. Where did I got lost a little bit? So
The other kind of voucher, the not tenant-based kind.
oh, the project-based vouchers are a little bit more complicated, and I don't know how much we want to go into that today. But a project-based voucher means that apartment buildings in Whatcom County, we have anywhere from 5 to 10 apartments that are designated specifically for veterans. And that veteran would make a decision about whether or not he wants to apply for housing at one of those units. Those units are usually a little bit more restrictive. They have a lot more security. They have a lot more rules, and it's been a challenge indeed to make project-based housing successful, but we're doing it. We have Citygate, we have 22 North, and we have Francis Place. And right now, Francis Place has a share of 5 vouchers. We have 4. We're still trying to do 1. Citygate has between 10 and 13, and 22 North has 5.
I don't want to hog all the questions, so I'll take a beat and see if anyone else has one. Okay, I have one final question. And
Yes,
Gary,
ma'am.
what is the difference between the types of support that you and Josh provide veterans and what generally is provided by Housing Case Management? Gary.
Well, again, that's a complicated issue that needs probably a little bit more exploration. But basically speaking, Josh and I, who are the VA social workers, we are licensed clinical social workers. Our job is to provide housing and provide the wherewithal for that veteran to keep his housing and not lose it. So we end up doing a lot of critical therapeutic interventions with veterans in order to keep them in housing. And these therapeutic interventions are related to my license or Josh's license. And this is not anything that a case manager at Opportunity Council or project-based units can do. So therefore, if a veteran is placed in housing, then it's my job to make sure that that person works through whatever psychological or financial or emotional issues he has to go through in order to maintain that permanent housing. And as you are all aware, that in and of itself can be quite a challenge. I think it's important for everybody to realize that, I mean, I'm sure you do, and I think from what I'm hearing today, I can see my need to become more involved in the coalition. But we strongly believe that housing first is important. And the process of taking a veteran and trying to make sure that he or she is eligible for housing and can obtain it is often quite a project. We spend a lot of time talking to real estate companies. We spend a lot of time talking to private owners to see whether or not they have the ability to house a homeless veteran. When a veteran does apply, the real estate company or the owner of the property will run a background check. And sometimes there are things that show up on the background check that would preclude that person from being housed in that particular facility.
Any more questions for Gary? Gary, you serve families as well as individual veterans, correct?
Yes, yes. It's interesting because for the number of years I've been here, which is about 12, most of my veterans were single individuals. We're seeming to be getting more referrals on families. Right now, I'm working with a woman and her child who are fleeing domestic violence. And we have them temporarily housed in a motel. And we're working desperately to try to find permanent affordable housing for this lady and her child.
Any other questions for Gary? I think I want to say a clarifying thing, and that's that Gary and Josh, they're professional mental health workers. And so their support for veterans at HUD-VASH is really clinical in nature, and that's what makes it different than other types of housing case management. And I want to happen to HUD-VASH or to SSVF, as we're going to be talking about shortly, is that it's a very collaborative community. And so through the coordinated entry process, we meet regularly. And that's why you see us all being real friendly with each other. We know each other pretty well because we meet every week and we discuss all the veteran seeking services, and we staff solutions creatively with other providers of veteran services as well as outreach workers.
Yeah, and Terry, you put it better than I did, and I appreciate your doing that. I think it's important for people to understand that the amount of time and effort that we put in to find permanent housing for a person who is chronically homeless or mentally ill or drug addicted is far greater than anything I would have anticipated prior to my becoming part of the VA. It's a challenging process. And the other thing is that there are a lot of people who don't want homeless people in their community. And I think we've been pretty successful in some areas at fighting that, but it's still an issue. And it does take a lot of time. I mean, we could easily have 3 HUD-VASH workers up here trying to take care of all the homeless population. And we still have a large number of people that are living out in the woods or they're in camps. And so therefore, my work with the HOT team is really important. And actually, they're a great group of people.
Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
Okay, one last call for questions before we move on. All right. Gary, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know this is your first day back to work. So I just really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's okay. I do need to leave because I have a veteran right now with a child who's looking for housing, and I got to try to help her. So
go get them.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'll look forward to doing it again.
Take care, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, last speaker, Hannah Hartman. Full disclosure, Hannah is my colleague. She works in the Whatcom Homeless Service Center. And I just want to describe something that's kind of unusual, and that's that our department holds a VA grant that serves SSVF. It's called Supportive Services for Veteran Families. And we subcontract out to others to provide the direct service. And Hannah works in this program, but as a healthcare navigator, which is a new position just in the last year and a half, 18 months. So we subcontract out with ourselves. So our community service office here at Opportunity Council provides services to veterans who are experiencing homelessness. Also, Skagit Community Action also provides services under this grant. Also, our Island County Service Office of Opportunity Council serves veterans. I can't talk. Okay. One last subcontractor is OliCap does this for us on the peninsula for Clallam and Jefferson counties. That's a really big territory. So we're all interconnected in serving veterans here. And I'm just going to stop talking and hand it over to Hannah. Can you please give us a quick overview of SSVF? And then what do you do in SSVF?
Absolutely. So I previously worked in the SSVF program over on the community services side for 2 years before this position came up. It was created during the pandemic, and I took it over. But during my time in SSVF, the SSVF program was created, roughly the timeline is around 2011, 2012. And it was part of an initiative to end veteran homelessness, or try and end veteran homelessness. You know, we're all looking for functional zero. And so this program was created to help veteran families that are currently experiencing homelessness or are at risk of or at risk of homelessness to kind of help stabilize and better support them and get them connected to the services that they need. So veterans usually come into the OC in a couple of different ways, but usually they come in through the CRC at our main desk, or they come in through the hot team. And so they do the, the initial kind of intake process, and then they go to a case manager. And from there, the case manager can help with things such as rental assistance, case management, connecting them to employment services. We work pretty closely with Liz and Paul and Gary and Josh. We can assist them with the kind of services that I offer. We can assist them with requesting military service records like their DD-214 or even their service medical records. We can do a little bit of everything. There's a new program that I am not super familiar about. So if Terry wants to jump in at all, there's a new VA program called Shallow Subsidy that is also kind of under the SSVF umbrella that we can help veterans with. And they come in and basically do an intake. There are some income limits, as there are with most programs. I believe it is 50% AMI for SSVF. And they are not allowed, or they are not able to have a dishonorable discharge and work with us. And they must currently be without housing or at risk of losing their housing. Those are kind of the big requirements to be able to work with the SSVF program. If we narrow in a little bit and focus on my program, so I am the Veteran Healthcare Navigator. I am only capable of working with folks that are enrolled in the SSVF program, but I'm more than willing to be a hub and try and connect folks to other services, even if they're not capable of working fully with me. So my position was created during the pandemic to try and get veterans to connect more to healthcare. And the VA has funded this position not only to get veterans connected to VA healthcare, which as Liz described can be really restrictive, but to get veterans connected to healthcare, period. Because they were finding that a lot of vets aren't utilizing healthcare or feel comfortable within the healthcare system. And I totally understand that. You go to a medical appointment and a doctor sees you for 5 minutes and tells you a list of diagnoses, and then tells you to get on out there and take care of stuff. And that can be a little defeating when you don't know where you're going to sleep that night or what you're going to get to eat. And so that's where I come in. So like Terry said, I am part of the SSVF grant, and I cover all of the counties that she mentioned. So I cover Skagit and Clallam and Jefferson and Island. And my job is just get veterans into the healthcare system, whether it's applying for Medicaid or Medicare or VA healthcare. I'll help them try and meet their medical goal, like their healthcare goals and their medical needs. And this can look anywhere from helping clients set up an appointment to actually, I've gone with a couple of clients to their medical appointments to try and be an advocate for them and help them feel like they're actually being heard by medical professionals. And also, some veterans have very particular feelings when it comes to healthcare, because when you're in the military, you don't necessarily have the most bodily autonomy. And so being in this environment and being able to actually have sort of say over what injections you get or what kind of medical procedures you have, or if you need VA healthcare, just being able to go. I help with just a little bit of everything, helping clients schedule transportation to get to medical appointments, helping connect them to mental health services, trying really hard to get veterans connected to dental services, which is probably the toughest part of my job in this area. Do a little bit of health education around things like vaccinations, health screenings. I am working with a truly unique population above and beyond the fact that they are veterans and the fact that I have folks from Vietnam era, which are going to be significantly older, than my vets that are in the post 9/11 era. And they're going to have completely different medical needs. So I'm either seeing younger vets that might have a little bit more of a grasp of how to manage their healthcare or what they need to do. And I'm working with folks from the Vietnam era that maybe don't have quite that grasp on things like telehealth appointments. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. Terry, are there any guiding questions to narrow me down a little bit?
I got some questions, but I want to make sure that if anyone in attendance has a question, that they're heard. And while I'm waiting, I'm going to scroll up because Joy asked a question earlier. It looks like she couldn't stay, but I thought this was a good question to ask you. Who has a record under these extreme circumstances, and the context in which she said that was when we were having the conversation about all the different levels of character of service. And I know as an SSVF case manager and healthcare navigator, you've had experience working with people who have other than honorable discharges. Do you perceive that there are barriers to housing related to their discharge?
If it comes to a program like HUD-VASH occasionally, that can be something of a restrictive program. Usually I would encourage a veteran to say, you know, I'm a veteran, and they don't need to get into their discharge status at all. And there are some folks that are out there that are very much willing to just house you for being a veteran. It is a mark of pride for people. So discharge status can limit what kind of services they can get within the VA, but not necessarily within the SSVF program, because it was designed to kind of be a broader catchment for those that don't just have an honorable discharge.
Sounds like landlords aren't going to ask necessarily about the character of service.
Most of them will not. Yeah.
Cassidy has a question. Are there special programs or resources to get veterans to appointments? I know that you do this for your veterans. The veterans that Hannah serves must be SSVF enrolled. So that's one caveat there. Marisa put a resource in the chat here for the DAV for rides. And then Liz mentioned our volunteer center has some programming to assist veterans to get rides. And then our community has Medicaid specialized transport too that can be accessed through Northwest Regional Council. That's not limited to veterans. That's anyone who's receiving Medicaid.
Yes, and I would tack on that this is why I try and get veterans involved with other healthcare beyond just VA healthcare, because things like the Medicaid transport is specifically through Medicaid, and they're more familiar with this area. Whereas I think things like the DAV are more focused on getting folks down to the CBOC in Mount Vernon, or even down to the Seattle, Puget Sound, VA.
Joe Gibson wants your phone number. What is it?
I'm putting it in there.
And Hannah, even though you have to, when you serve veterans, they must be SSVF enrolled. You're willing to take field calls from the community, just generalized questions, helping people figure out where to start, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I am never going to turn someone away who says, you know, I have a question about something to do with a vet. I'm never going to say no to anybody. So, I mean, I'll put my contact information in the chat, and everyone's more than welcome to reach out if you have a question. And if I don't know, I will always try and find out or point you to someone who does know.
Thanks, Hannah. And I just should say that about SSVF housing program in general, separate from the housing navigation that Hannah specializes in, what it is time limited financial support for rent and case management. What that time limit has been kind of a moving target through COVID, because the VA has tried to be very nimble to respond to the needs of veterans. But essentially, in SSVF, your case manager is going to meet with you, the veteran, and help you find a place to live, and help you move in, and help you pay your rent. Not necessarily the case with HUD-VASH. HUD-VASH has units in projects. So it could be a unit that's attached to that subsidy, or it could be the tenant base where they also have to provide housing search support. Thanks for you putting your info in there. Oh, Liz, thanks for answering Debbie's question about peer support for veterans during their appointments. That's great. Growingveterans.org is a resource. Do we have any other questions about veterans for Hannah? Liz is still here. No. Okay. Thank you so much, Hannah and Liz, and Gary and Paul, who have already left. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for
And
having us.
anytime. Okay, I think we're ready to move on our agenda here. And the next thing is a City of Bellingham update. Katie, do you mind speaking to that?
Can I just ask a really quick question about the HUD-VASH thing?
Yeah.
Did you say that the SSVF program would not provide case management all the way through?
HUD-VASH is a permanent subsidy with ongoing support. So that's technically a PSH, permanent supportive housing program, whereas SSVF is an RRH, rapid rehousing program. Does that answer your question, Bart?
Kind of. There's so many notes. I'm going away now.
Thank you, Bart. Don't worry, I can help you later. Katie, sorry about that. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you to everyone who's spoken today. It's a great panel, learned a lot, and appreciate your time. I don't have much today in the way of city updates, but I do want to provide a quick update on the city's consolidated plan process and share some opportunities for public feedback with this group. So as some of you may know or may not know, the consolidated plan is a plan that the city is required to create every 5 years by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The plan outlines how our city anticipates spending our allocation of federal funding in the community, specifically in regards to human services and housing projects for low-income residents in the community, and households with special needs, such as the elderly or disabled. Included in the plan is an assessment of the city's community development needs, and the goals and strategies and specific activities that will be implemented to address those needs in the community. So we're now in the process of creating our next consolidated plan, which will cover the next 5 years. So the period from 2023 to 2027. And we're anticipating that the next draft plan will be organized around 5 different topics. So those 5 different topics are equitable access to housing, addressing and preventing homelessness, securing housing for vulnerable groups, community services and facilities, and climate resiliency and disaster preparedness. So a big part of the consolidated planning process involves collecting community input, which is why I wanted to note some opportunities here today for folks to get involved and make your voice heard. In order to solicit community feedback, an Engage Bellingham page has been created that details more of the consolidated planning process and really drills down into detail on each of those 5 topics that I just mentioned. I will share the link to that Engage Bellingham page in the chat. And I really want to invite everyone on this meeting today to visit that page and submit any questions or comments or ideas that you may have on how to best utilize our community's allocation of federal funds over the next 5 years. Any feedback that is shared on the site is ultimately going to be incorporated into that larger consolidated plan. I should note that this isn't going to be the only opportunity for public engagement during this planning process. We as the city have hosted focus groups and public engagement sessions all over town. Recent events at Villa Santa Fe and the Max Higsby Center come to mind. So if you have an idea for or a desire to have the city host an engagement session near you or at your organization, we'd love to hear your ideas, and please feel free to reach out and we can kind of start working in earnest on getting something scheduled. So yeah, I'll post my email to the chat and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'll also post the link to that Engage Bellingham site. And thank you in advance for your insights, for your ideas. They're really appreciated and a really valuable component to this planning process.
Thanks, Katie. Any questions for Katie? No? I saw a no? Okay. Next up on the agenda is county update. Chris, are you available to do that?
Yes, thank you, Terry.
Thanks.
And I will try to be pretty brief with this. So there's a lot going on at the county these days. We recently had an RFP available. That's a request for proposals for some funding for various projects that we're looking to fund in 2023 and the future after that. We got some pretty good applications. We're going through them still. We haven't made any decisions. Awards will be announced later this month, but we got some good applications for interim shelter facilities as well as community leasing service. We're also in negotiations for a partnership to have an organization host and staff a severe weather shelter this winter. We are looking forward to 2023 already, in the sense that we're looking into the future, not like we're super excited about it. But you know, it's a mixed bag. The 2023 budget process has begun. It does look like there's going to be a modest decline in funds in 2023 because we're losing a lot of sort of COVID-specific federal funds that have been really helpful over the last couple of years. But we do have some new funding to replace most of that. The details are pretty detailed. One of the big pots of funding that's been really helpful in our community has been eviction prevention funding that came through the CARES Act. And then we supplied through the ARPA. That is going to be partially made up for with the Department of Commerce funding for eviction prevention. And we're looking at making that shift probably sometime in the late spring, moving from one funding source to another. That eviction prevention funding has been huge. The Opportunity Council right now is serving about 500 households per month who are behind on their rent. So that's something that has been really important, and we're trying to look at ways to kind of have a soft transition to a little bit less funding available there. Our priorities for 2023 as far as budgeting go will mostly be the same as what we've done. You know, we put out our strategic plan in 2019 right before COVID hit, which has been a little bit of a juggle, but I think most of those community values are still where they were when we checked in and did all that legwork in 2019. Some of the areas that we'll be focused on specifically include resolving unsheltered homelessness for families with children, expanding emergency shelter capacity, and diversity of emergency shelters. And then we're also looking to increase our focus on improving supportive services that permit supportive housing facilities and some other housing interventions. We recognize that the costs are increasing and there's a lot of vacant positions with our partners. So we want to help them increase staff retention and make it easier to recruit staff that are qualified for those jobs. We also expect an Access ID type program to return next year, which will be great for people that have misplaced or lost their IDs for whatever reason. We know that that's a big hurdle for a lot of folks, and it's tough to get through that paperwork without the proper IDs. Speaking of severe weather, we are looking to get that hosted. It's most likely going to be at the Civic Field in those locker rooms again. Thank you, City of Bellingham, for making that spot available. It's not like the ideal place in town to do it, but the facility itself is actually pretty good. There's a lot of room there. There are showers right there, which is really nice. Some attached offices for storage or other, you know, office-y type stuff that goes along with that. We're also trying to prepare for some, if we need expansion. We got some really heavy duty heaters that we can put into a different location in addition to that one if we need to do that. So we're trying to be ready for cold weather. As far as the hot weather goes, the health department has been working with the city, some of our shared partners and some of the health department's partners to get some AC units in place. You know, I know it's August now, but it's not impossible that we get another heat wave this year. Wildfire smoke is another thing we've been considering, trying to get people set up with fan filters and masks and things like that for indoor spaces. We are looking at some slight capacity changes to our housing inventory, which is good. I'm happy to announce that, I don't know if anyone's mentioned this already, but Lydia Place's new Heart House permanent supportive housing facility is up and running. There's 11 new units of long-term supportive housing for families there. And we also are looking at some potential partnerships with Mercy Housing to add more housing units. I don't know if folks caught this in the news a couple weeks ago, but there was a purchase made for the Evergreen Ridge apartment complex that preserved affordability for 143 units for households earning less than 60% AMI. That was a pretty big deal for us. The terms of affordability were the period in which the owner of the units had to have it affordable as a condition of their financing was about to expire. And those units were looking like they were going to go to another party who was going to buy the complex and most likely raise the rent to whatever the market would bear. So we were concerned about that. The city caught wind of this, brought the county in as a partner, and Mercy Housing Northwest was able to purchase those and preserve the affordability there. So we're pretty excited about that. The last thing I want to mention, and Terry, I don't know if you were going to get into this, was the point in time count. Okay, I'll leave that for you, Terry.
Wait, you can hit it. I'll just fill in later.
Sure. So the point in time count was published. The report was published. It's there's nothing really all that surprising in there, I would say. The usual caveats are there. It's a report of the people who were counted. It's not a comprehensive report of every single person experiencing homelessness in the county, because that would be impossible. So it reflects a lot of hard work and a lot of effort from the people that did the surveys. We work to try to report in a fair way, like what it says and what it doesn't say. The overall numbers aren't too different from the previous years. There's a slight decrease in the number of individuals, a slight increase in the number of households. There was a pretty cool infographic that some of my colleagues here at the health department made. I'm going to put that into the chat if folks want to have a look at that. I think it's a nice summary of how that result shook out. We're getting down in the hourglass here, so I'm going to cut it off there, and I'm happy to answer questions later, either at the end of this meeting or through emails or phone calls if y'all want to get a hold of me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. It looks like Marcus has a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. I'm heartened that you've got some applicants for emergency sheltering RFP. That's good news. I'm with SOS. We did not feel that we could do that. I know that other nonprofits felt that they could not meet the requirements. It did read more like an RFQ than an RFP, but it did do an awful good job of the needs assessment of the populations that are not being served that need to be served, and I'm really appreciative of that coming from the county. And I'm also heartened. I believe that I heard you talking about trying to address the hot weather issues as it comes up. I know we don't have temperature thresholds or anything to observe right now in any official capacity. So I hope we can come up with something quickly with that makes sense. And of course SOS supports all that. But I am still concerned about standing up a congregate shelter for emergency sheltering while we're still in a pandemic. It's rather contraindicated, and CDC recommendations are that's kind of like the last measure you would do. It's always the first thing we do. And I'm wondering, have you looked into anything else like larger tiny home villages for a triage emergency type basis?
Yes, I mean we're open to anything. I think we would need to see a good proposal where it made sense and there are lots of considerations taken into account. Hotels, unfortunately, are just about full, so we've really struggled to have hotel rooms available for emergency shelter. We are aware that COVID is not over. People are still getting it. Now there's the concern of monkeypox, and especially when it comes to close quarters and sharing things like bedding and stuff like that can be a hazard there as well. So thank you for bringing that up. We are doing our best to kind of mitigate those hazards as much as we can. Getting people set up so they have some different options. But that's an ongoing challenge.
Great. And just a quick follow-up. So do you feel that we have on the horizon of a hot weather, a cold area that so a cooling center? Do we have anything in the works for Bellingham? I know they were all over the county, but Bellingham did not have any when we went to our last event.
Yeah, there's a list out there of places people can go. Base camp, of course, is a huge one, and I know that there are people that don't want to go to base camp for some reasons that are important to them.
Well, there's no room either. But,
sorry.
Well, there's no room either, but there's that. they've been pretty plugged all spring and summer.
Yeah, I think their day center, at least for folks coming in during the day, there's room there. And Terry just put a cooling centers link up as well. So I think that has mostly been addressed. I mean, there are always going to be folks that won't go, and the homeless outreach team is doing a fine job getting out there, and other agencies as well,
Sure.
to provide water.
Sure, we do that too. My question though is, will Whatcom County be making any effort to get something set up in the city of Bellingham, failing the city of Bellingham doing it?
I don't think that we're gonna.
Excuse me. I mean, that's just because we do that work that we're watching people really suffer. So we're trying to figure out how to alleviate that.
Yeah, I think there's a number of efforts underway, both from the county and the city. We try to coordinate so that we're not, being redundant as much as we can, and addressing both, unsheltered folks in shelters, and even people in substandard housing where there's heat risk there too. So yeah, we are working on that.
Okay, I thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
The city DEM is
Thanks,
not doing that right.
Appreciate that. And the concern for cooling is not just limited to homeless folks. It's a lot of seniors that are not able to get out of their housing and cool themselves either. So this is just it's a complication of climate change that we all need to contend with in the future. I know that my boss, Greg Winter, advocates for new projects to be built with air conditioning. So yeah, we're well aware of that. I'm going to continue on with the service center update and talk about the point in time count, which, I got to tell you, it's not good news. Not that it ever is, but we had a little dip in individuals counted, as Chris mentioned. I don't think it's statistically significant. We had some restrictions still on how to obtain surveys due to the COVID restrictions. For one thing, when the date of the count, we don't pick it. Okay, we're told by the Department of Commerce, this is the day you all got to count. So in 2021, that coincided on the same day that a lot of homeless folks were dispersed from in front of City Hall. That was a challenge. This year, the date landed in the middle of the Omicron surge. So the first time that I'm aware of, Commerce actually moved the date. So it didn't happen in the end of January like usually. It happened in February this year. To protect volunteers from that Omicron surge, we did not solicit volunteers. The amount of sites that we could count at continues to be limited. The service center staff and all of our partner providers that are housing folks in emergency shelter all participated in this count. The homeless outreach team did the outdoor count. And we counted, let's see, the lowest number of individuals unsheltered yet. And I don't think that's anything to write home about. Again, we didn't have as many volunteers counting. We're restricted as far as where we can go in the county to count folks. But I do think that decrease is influenced positively by the additional resources made available in our community related to the pandemic. So the city and the county worked really, really hard to make sure, in particular, that families with children, which we saw a spike of, were sheltered. And then that increase in motel stays for families with children really reduced our unsheltered numbers, I think. Let's see, what else would I say about it? We counted 639 households. So it was 832 individuals, 639 households, and 82 of those households were families with children, which again, I don't think is good news. We see in our housing application pool, we see a lot more families at that, becoming homeless, needing services, and really struggling to to move into housing because of the pressure we have on our housing system and the market, and struggling to even exit from programs that support them with rental assistance because their rent keeps going up. So it's a challenge all over, and we all know that. Aside from the point in time count, I have a quick update from the service center. One of our outreach team members went on to another partner provider, so we're happy for her and we'll see her again, but we are interviewing for another outreach person right now. We've hired a landlord liaison, Kelsey Steed, who's here, and I'm not going to call her out, but she's great. She's a resource for our entire community. So anyone looking to work with landlords to develop relationships, mediation with tenants, that's the kind of thing that Kelsey can really be helpful with. And you just call the service center and to get connected to her. Here's a number, 360-255-2091. I'll put it in the chat in a minute. I'm really excited about this next update. I'm talking really fast because I see it's in the 501. Sorry about that. We'll be recruiting for housing navigators shortly. And I'm really excited about this because this is also a resource to the community, not limited to people who fit into coordinated entry guidelines for eligibility. This housing navigator will be housed in the service center, and I'm anticipating a relocation that'll really make us more accessible to our clients. Right now, it's very challenging. We don't have, everything is kind of over the phone or socially distanced, but I anticipate that changing in the fall. And that's the end of my update. I see Doug has his hand up.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment about the point in time count. So, Homes Now played a role in the time count. So, like, we were able, because when somebody is in a tiny home village and they're not like just raw on the streets, it's a lot easier to get that count of people that are in there. So, I think that some of the numbers related to like how the number of unsheltered has gone down. We maybe played a role in it because we house nearly 50 people or shelter nearly 50 people. So, so we were able to get most of our residents to fill that out. And I think that, yeah, it's undercounted. Like every year it's undercounted. There's a lot more people that are actually homeless than not, but we just wanted to help where we could and make sure everybody that lives in our villages is counted, but they are counted as sheltered and homeless, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to like put that out there.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks. Okay. Any other questions for me? Or now we're at the point of public comment if anyone wants to say something else. Katie.
Hi, I know we're over time, so I'll be really quick, but wanted to just throw in a quick comment on the topic of severe weather. Climate resiliency is going to be a key topic, a key area of focus for our next consolidated plan. So I know this is a long-term concern and we're speaking about it kind of now at the end of the meeting. The Engage Bellingham page that I mentioned earlier, the climate resiliency topic page of that opens on September 15th. So I encourage all comments and ideas, such as the one noted earlier about the cooling center. I encourage folks to kind of note those ideas on that page. Thank you.
Anyone else? Doug?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention a few things a little bit because it just popped up in the chat and was what I mentioned earlier about the 22 North issues. I have no interest in getting any housing shut down or like messed up in any kind of way. I just want everybody's situation to improve, including those in housing or whatever. But I only wanted to interject and kind of mention this a little bit because you know, Homes Now manages 2 tiny home villages that are technically classified as shelter and not housing, right? And so we have actually had residents that have been offered housing, you know, at 22 North or Francis Place or whatever, and they have actually turned it down. They've actually said, well, I think I'd rather live at Unity Village than 22 North. And so I'm not trying to compare or contrast, but the only reason why I mention it is because we actually get kind of like some pushback from the city at some time. or at certain times that, this is meant to be temporary, it's transitional housing and a stepping stone into actual housing. And so we get kind of a little bit of I would say criticism, but it's a little indirect that, hey, some of your residents have been there kind of a long time, or, they might have been offered housing in one of these places and they've turned it down. And so that might be seen as a problem, but the way that we see it is that, yeah, it is temporary, but, if there was enough housing available, there was enough places available that someone would want to jump into as housing, then we wouldn't even need to be here. And we are here as long as we need to be until that problem is resolved. And but at the same time, I know it's temporary, but the temporary might be longer and longer and longer because of the options available to people and some benefits that come from living in a community living setting versus a either individualistic housing setting or a congregate shelter setting. And zoning doesn't even allow for this type of housing model to work, like with if you didn't have a temporary site with a homeless shelter and you wanted like a long-term site where people could own their tiny homes and have equity in it and then upgrade from there. That currently doesn't exist in the zoning at all. And so if that were to be allowed to exist, and because even if we could buy some land right now, we would not be able to have that model in a permanent setting. It's actually not allowed in the zoning, as far as building codes and as far as the zoning for multiple people living on one site versus 3 unrelated people living together. There's actually regulations that say only a certain number of people or households can live on one site and stuff. So I think that one thing that would really improve things is if we had what we have now, but we also have another option in the zoning and land use that isn't there now. And I just wanted to add that. So that's all.
Thanks, Doug. Fun.
Hello. Let's see. A couple things. For the emergency shelter personnel, I was wondering if AmeriCorps, the contracts that the city of Bellingham has, and then maybe county could expand what they have with the Washington Conservation Corps and the Department of Ecology. Could AmeriCorps workers and volunteers, crew members, be some of the personnel for emergency shelter operations? And now that AmeriCorps is offering more 300 to 450 hour contracts, it was just something that I thought maybe might be an option. And then some good news, I figured it was good news. I went to the Department of Commerce webinar today, hosted by the Housing Division, and there's a housing or a home ownership trust fund. I think, fact check me, please. $25 million in that is going to be put toward supporting people in their cooperative efforts, community land trusts, manufactured homes, condominium developments, that sort of thing. So I just was thinking that's some good news, that maybe more and more people can, community members, neighbors can organize amongst themselves and form limited equity cooperatives, and reimagine the agency that we have in building housing for ourselves, if that makes sense. And those were the only two things. And please tell me your thoughts.
Thank you, Vaughn. I mean, I think cooperative housing is great. And maybe to Doug's point, really the issue is the path to get there. I'm not super familiar with it. I'll be frank about that. Does anyone else want to comment before we're done for the day?
I can just chip in real quick on an answer for Vaughn's first part about the AmeriCorps volunteers. When it comes to partnering with organizations to do these kinds of work, yeah, we love volunteers. We love AmeriCorps. We love paid staff. Anyone who has the credentials to do it, we're interested in working with you. So yes, that's a great way to go.
Thanks, Chris. Doug.
I just wanted to say one thing really quickly and small. I think that what needs to happen is a lot of options. So, you know, all the stuff we've been talking about has revolved around we do this, we do that. This is supposed to be this is supposed to be that. But the fact is that if we have a lot of options, then people will get the help that they need. And so, you know, Homes Now is an option. And there's a lot of other options out there, and so I would advise the city and the county and any people that can help to get experimental and allow for more options to occur, other than what we do, other than what you guys do, and between all of that, I think that we'll be able to actually reduce the visible level of homelessness throughout this city and county, and so I just hope that can happen. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
One last thing, may I?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. That just reminded me. A couple of times that I've brought up, like housing projects such as Mercy Housing and affordable housing projects. I was wondering, like, maybe after 15 years or so, would that affordable housing project consider opening up the ownership of that building to the residents, so that then it would go from a affordable housing organization, property management, into like a condominium complex that's run by the residents. And so far, nobody's totally shot me down on it. So maybe it's possible, even though like legalities would be like really, really super complicated. But I just wanted to put that out there. And any other thoughts on that? I'm open to hearing more too.
That makes me wish we had more developers in attendance here. I don't have the answer to your question. I do know that usually tax credits are the way that housing is kept affordable, but there's an affordability period, whatever that is, right? So it doesn't have to be a nonprofit that acquires these tax credits to develop housing, but often it is. So if it's a mission-driven nonprofit, so for example, Opportunity Council has a tax credit project at 22 North, and I strongly suspect that once that affordability period is over, the agency is not going to then flip it to market rate. It's not in alignment with our mission. But some developers who are not mission-driven may not be motivated that way. So I guess what I'm saying is, Vaughn, I like your thinking so much. It's exciting. And maybe the developers to target for that idea would be people who are mission driven. Anything else before we adjourn? I sure appreciate everyone staying so late. Okay, well, I'm going to call it. Our next meeting is in October. It's on the 6th, 3:30 to 5. Be on Zoom. Our topic is going to be back to school, and we'll have some providers to talk about homeless youth and their experiences in school and accessing services. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a really great afternoon. Bye.